As I walked out of the pharmacy, I spoke to my mother on the phone. "Yes, Isabella told me, Mom. I'm on my way," I said, sounding reassuringly. It had been a very long and tiring day. Despite that, I had to visit the hospital because my aunt was admitted, and she was about to deliver her baby. Everyone else in my family was enjoying a vacation in Ohio, but since I couldn't leave my work, here I was, working myself to the bones. I was grateful for my joint family, but sometimes I couldn't help but feel envious of other families in the state. It was well past midnight when I finished the call. I had to hurry to reach the hospital. "Don't be late. Cecile doesn't have anyone at the hospital." Mom's words echoed in my ears as she had warned me before we hung up. My car was at the service center, and I still hadn't eaten dinner. With a heavy heart, I started walking towards the bus stop. While walking, I passed an old cemetery I had seen many times before. It was rumored to be haunted. Despite this, I had never witnessed anything strange or scary there. But suddenly, I heard a peculiar thrusting noise, as if someone was digging. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I tried to convince myself that it was probably just a gardener or a construction worker working late. I knew I didn't have time to detour to check what was happening there, but my curiosity got the better of me, as it often does. I forgot all about my Aunt Cecile and her baby within seconds, and I wanted to know who was digging at this time of night and why. My mind raced with the possibilities. There could be a crime in progress, and I might be able to prevent it. With that in mind, I took a deep breath and started walking towards the source of the sound. The sound was unmistakably emanating from inside the cemetery, not from outside. And as I silently followed it, I found myself walking deeper. The graveyard was adjacent to the woods on the opposite end, and the digging noise seemed stronger. I halted as my eyes landed on a man in a black robe who looked like some priest, and a woman in a filthy black garment that appeared to be a wedding dress. She was excavating a grave. As I attempted to hide and observe what they were doing, I felt a chilly breeze brush against my face, and my body began to tremble. 3 to 4 minutes after my arrival, I heard a clunk, which indicated that they had been doing this for some time. Most likely, it was the sound of the shovel slamming into the casket. She paused for a few seconds and threw the shovel aside. Then, almost maniacally, she knelt and started eliminating the remaining soil from her hands. The man assisted her in lifting the casket when she was finished digging. After opening it, she removed a man's dead body from the coffin who appeared to have died recently. It was far creepier than it sounds, and when she hugged him, while sporting a psychotic smile, my mind began screaming at me to flee, but I couldn't. I watched as she managed to carry him to the trees, where she covered her face with a veil, and the man in the robe began performing a marriage ritual. I tried to take a good look at them, and that was when I noticed his robe had some occult signs all over it. A weird feeling started to form in my gut, and I didn't want to stay there any longer. But as I tried to walk back, I accidentally stepped on the dried leaves, which made a crunching sound, causing them to look around to see if anyone was in the cemetery beside them. I panicked and quickly hid there. After a few glances here and there, they probably thought it was a mouse or something as they returned their focus to the eldritch wedding. I stood there frozen, my eyes fixated on the scene before me. My heart almost jumped out of my throat as I watched her lips meet his in a passionate embrace. It was as if time had stopped eerily and everything around me blurred. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. and a feeling of unease began to settle in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't help but think that what they were doing was wrong on so many levels. My dread intensified as she sank her teeth into his lips, ripped it off his mouth, and started crunching it like some snack, turning what was once only an unhinged act into something terrifying. The nightmarish scene made me sick and want to throw my guts out. The man in the robe drew out a small black book and started reciting something as she devoured the corpse, similar to a flesh-eating animal. I stood there paralyzed with fear as I witnessed the most disturbing events unfolding right before my eyes. As the recitation finished, the occult priest joined her too, and now the two of them looked like demons or monsters who had come out straight from hell. Suddenly, my phone started ringing, grabbing their attention. They stopped what they were doing and began walking toward me. I immediately got up and started running. The woman walked slowly while the man walked so fast that I had to run as quickly as possible. Even then, I felt like he was about to catch me any minute. Those were the most terrifying moments of my life. If I knew my intention of helping someone in trouble would turn into a living nightmare, I would have never gone there in the first place. My phone continued ringing the entire time. It was probably either Mom or Isabella, who must have wanted to know why I hadn't reached the hospital yet. Without turning back, I ran to the bus stop, and luckily, the bus to the hospital was still there. So, I quickly ran inside it. I turned back to see those two standing at a distance with a sinister glare. A shiver ran down my body, and I hastened to an empty seat. As I extracted the ringing device from my pocket, Isabella's name flashed on the screen. "Where have you been, Trisha?" An ear-splitting roar met my ear as I answered the call. "I understand you work overtime, but Mom's alone there," she snarled. I gave a long, weary sigh as I replied, "Yes, I'm on my way." "Still? You said I disconnected the call before she could finish her sentence. There was so much on my mind. There were still chills in my entire body, and I was in no condition to hear her nagging. I leaned in the seat and shut my eyes, eagerly anticipating my arrival at the destination. But my mind was plagued by the recurring images of spine-chilling scenes that played like a horror movie in my head. I tried to push them away, but they lingered like a persistent nightmare.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
So when I was 15, my mom was friends with a man who wanted to date her, Jake. My mom was not interested in a relationship with this man at all, and in fact was dating another guy by the name of Colt. My family is full of pretty serious rednecks, and my mom is no exception. So one day my mom invited Colt and his roommate Frank over to shoot some guns at her home range. We shoot for a while and eventually went in around dark. So my mom and Colt got drunk after we went in. Frank cannot drive due to some brain damage, so they ended up staying the night at the house. At around 2 a.m. I was still up playing video games. My mom and Colt were in her room asleep when Frankie comes running down the hallway saying a truck just pulled into the driveway. I look out the window and see that it's Jake. Apparently my mom hadn't texted him in a few hours, and he's extremely possessive, so he went by to check and see if she was home. Keep in mind, Colt's Ranger was parked in the driveway and is very obviously a guy's truck. Think spiked lug nuts, spur hanging from the rear view, skull hydro dip dash. Jake absolutely flips upon seeing this. He starts ringing the doorbell non-stop, beating on the door, walking around the house beating on windows, screaming my mom's name and circling Colt's truck. At this point my mom and Colt are awake, and since we have blackout curtains, she tells us to keep the lights off and hide in the hallway. And if we don't do anything or respond, they'll think no one's home and leave. Colt, being completely sober now, is understandably livid, threatening to go out and deal with it, as he put it. It's now important to point out the size difference between Colt and Jake. Colt's 5'5" and about 125 pounds soaking wet. Jake is 6'3", 240. Jake could punt Colt 50 feet if he wanted to. Because of this, my mom forces Colt to stay inside. This went on for 45 minutes. At one point, we see the camera monitor in my mom's room that Jake has punched the side of Colt's truck. Then we hear the screen to one of the windows slide up. The window in question is locked and Jake couldn't fit through anyway, thank God. It's at this point that I think of the only thing that will make Jake leave. I grab a gun, act terrified, which at this point I am, and walk to the living room and ask, "Who is it?" out the window. Jake realizes it's me and asks where my mom is. I tell him she's out with her friends and that I haven't heard from her and I'll call him when she gets home if I'm awake. He says thank you and left. After all that nonsense he did, that's all it took for him to leave. And honestly, I was amazed. I genuinely thought I was going to have to shoot this guy. Later on that night at around 4, we hear his truck outside again. He squeals his tires down the road, obviously angry that my mom hadn't called him. The next morning, he's back again at 10, again beating on the doors and windows, screaming and trying to get a reaction. Colt again then tries to go out and handle it, but Mom won't let him. He finally leaves again, and Colt goes out and looks at his truck. There's a 3-inch deep dent in the side of his bed. Colt is understandably mad and tells my mom to let him know if that freaking creep comes back. Jake had beat on our doors until his hand bled. This also may have been from hitting the truck, but I don't know, and had blood on the doors and windows. My mom wouldn't let me call the police because she felt that it would just cause unnecessary strain and that she thought it was over, so the cops were unfortunately never involved. She was also worried he'd do worse if the police got involved. My mom stopped talking to Jake after that, and I never felt comfortable at that house at night again. Once I started driving, I didn't stay the night there very much, opting to visit during the day and go back to my dad's at night.
I, Samantha Britt, take Nicholson Adamson as my beloved husband, and I vow to stand by his side till death do us part. I watched as my best friend took her vows with the guy who used to be my husband, which was quite painful if I'm being honest. As I kept my hatred for my best friend inside to marry my ex, I gave them a fake smile while dressing as one of the bridesmaids. You guys must be thinking about what's going on over here, so let me just give you a quick glimpse on my past. I married Nicholson 5 years ago after 3 years of dating, but we couldn't keep our marriage together even for the duration of our dating life and ended up getting divorced 2 months before our 3rd anniversary. We moved on with our lives, but I was still unable to let go of the love and memories I had with him. I heard his name again 6 months ago, when my best friend returned from Paris from her vacation. She told me that they met there and ended up having the greatest time of their lives. Even then, I couldn't help but feel anger and jealousy deep inside. But I decided to not show that in front of Samantha, which she took the wrong way and started dating him. She thought I was completely moved on with my life and had completely forgotten about him. I let it be thinking it might be another way of Sammy's flings and it won't last much longer. But I was wrong. 2 months later, here she was having a sleepover at my place, telling me how he popped the question and asked her to marry him. Seriously, 2 months. They couldn't even wait 2 years, so that I may get used to maybe seeing them together. But since I didn't want to lose my best friend over a man, I stayed silent. She crossed the limit when she asked me to be her bridesmaid, knowing I may have felt, but I kept my silence again. But now, I'm watching this happen in front of my eyes, the two of them getting married. I couldn't watch any longer, so without turning back or listening to anyone, I rushed out. I removed the heels that were killing my feet, and tears started to stream through my eyes, which I did not care to wipe away as I kept walking in the middle of the road. It was nighttime, so not many people or vehicles were around. That was when a black van stopped in front of me, and 2 men in masks pulled me inside. They put a wet cloth over my nose with a strong smell, which made my vision start getting blurry. And within minutes, everything went dark and I passed out. The next thing I knew was that I woke up in the middle of nowhere, a place surrounded by trees. I tried to get a hold of the surroundings despite my foggy mind, and I figured I was in the woods. There was the same black van parked at a distance, and the two men were standing near it talking about something, while my hands and legs were tied. Damn it. My day could not get any worse than this. First, my ex married my best friend, and now I could not even indulge in self-pity anymore because I had gotten myself kidnapped. As my brain was getting clearer, I started to try and figure out a way to escape from the situation I was in. I tried to crawl away like a snake, but the pebbles and branches were making it difficult as they hurt me as I moved around. On top of that, the two men turned their head toward me when they heard the rustling sound and my crawling between leaves. My mind was blank. Not even a single idea was passing my brain. It wasn't like I wasn't terrified in this situation because, trust me, I was beyond terrified thinking what might happen next to me. But I was the kind of girl who would try to make best to find a way before giving up. At the same time, I saw the pointy bark of the tree beside me, so I moved closer very slowly and quietly and started to rub the rope over it, hoping it might get after an hour or two. That was when I heard a very familiar voice. "This will never work, Sasha, so stop trying." I raised my head in shock, and it was him. "Nicholson, what are you... No, why did you kidnap me? Didn't you just marry Sammy?" I was completely freaked out and confused seeing him here, but instead of replying to any of my questions or even saying a word, he silently smiled and squatted down next to me. He stroked my hair lightly with his hand and then moved it to my cheeks, caressing them. After about 10 minutes of his silence, as I stared at him with my eyes torn open unbelievably, he finally spoke. "I never should have divorced you. I missed you so much that I had to resort to such means to meet you again. Do you even know how heartbroken I felt when you wouldn't see me even for once? Why did you kidnap me, Nicholson?" I put force on every word as I asked, gritting my teeth. He took a deep sigh and said, "It was so that you wouldn't resist meeting or talking to me. You know I still love you with all my heart. I never meant to divorce you, truly. I only did it to punish you a little, and I was planning to get back together, but you completely shut me out." I looked at him dumbfounded as he blabbered all this, unable to believe my ears. Whatever he was saying sounded utterly rubbish to me. It felt like he had lost his mind completely. "But we're divorced, and you're married to my best friend now, so please let me go, Nicholson," I said in a slow, calm voice so that he would reflect on what he did. "No, I only married Samantha to be with you again. I know how much she means to you, and that's why I knew you wouldn't miss her wedding no matter what. And you know what? When I saw you walk out of the wedding, I knew you still had feelings for me." "You're wrong. It wasn't the reason I walked out. Sammy's like a sister to me. We've always been together ever since we were children. That's why it was hard for me to see her betray me, even after knowing how much pain and suffering you would put me through." The way he was looking at me while I said all this, I knew he didn't believe me. "I'm not letting you go, honey. I know you still love me. So now, the two of us will be together forever." He said while laughing like a maniac, which scared me to the point that the pain while crawling back wasn't unbearable anymore. "Please don't do this. Police are going to find out and you'll get in trouble." I could feel my voice trembling as I said this. He laughed and moved closer, grabbing my face in one of his hands. He forcefully kissed me. Then he leaned toward my left ear. "Trust me, no one will ever find out. For them, I'm spending my first night with my newly wedded wife. He injected something in my hand as he said this. I looked into his eyes in confusion as my vision started to get blurry. I saw him getting up and mouthing the words, "I love you." The story started when I saw the girl for a first time. She was tall and pretty, and looked she was the prettier of the entire ones standing. I had no idea what my father and I were doing there. "Son, we are here for you. Since your mom left me, we are here to get you a mom." I wasn't really sure what was going on, and I said, "What is going on, Pop?" And he said, "I am here to get you a new stepmom." I was surprised with everything going on. I asked my father if it was the most necessary thing to do, and he said that he is. It was a Romanian bride shop, and all the girls here were from Romania, waiting to be wed and have an American green card. My father picked one of the fieriest brides he could. Her name was Rosalina, and she was very outspoken, and her English was quite broken. It wasn't very legal if anyone was wondering, but it wasn't something that people weren't aware of, hence my father knew about it. He was the most clueless man, and the fact that he heard about this and decided to act upon it was strange as it is. He did all the proceedings that were to be done to bring it to being closest to legal, and then went out to marry Rosalina. I was very skeptic of Rosalina. I knew she wasn't the best person to be around, but her presence cheered up my father a bit, and it was something that I would tolerate her for that. But she used to dress up like a pen girl for my father and joke around a lot. It was weird since she barely knew him or me. She got used to the part of being his wife. It was the stepmother part she was having trouble with. She was way younger than my father, but I guess the father issue she might have been clouded the judgment, but since she was only merely 10 to 15 years older than me, the stepmother part was something she wasn't getting used to and would often forget that boundary. Even though I made sure every single time to remind her of the boundary that she's so much pretty, much leaning on to cross every time. Even though my father was a great guy to her, there were just some things that he just wouldn't understand. And there, I would come in to help her. I guess I was the only friend she had in that place, and then one day, while from her regular visit from the market she got back, she had a bruise in her eye, and she looked awfully pale and scared of everything happening in the moment. She came back all teary-eyed and told me what happened. She said that the Russian guys harassed her, and it was pretty clear why. She said that she knew them back from Europe, and her ex-husband rolls with them. She asked for my help, and I told her there's nothing I can do. And it was true, too. I cannot go on and be rivals with Russian mobsters. I gotta care about my neck. But she insisted on me doing something, so I decided to have a civilized talk with them, even though I was certain that there is a good chance that I might end up face down in the alleyway of Brooklyn somewhere. Few days later, I decided to head to Sergei's cleaner shop. I asked the man where to have a conversation with Sergei. At first he refused and said, "I don't know any Sergei." And then I replied, "Come on, man, we are just two guys talking." I knew the game, and I knew what I was getting into. But I had to do it for the sake of my father and the stepmother, so I put in the theatrics I needed. The guy looked at me with the stern look, and I did back. And minutes later, he opened the coat drawer and let me in. There on the other side, I found myself in the club where a bunch of big muscular Russians were playing cards. "Hey, which one of you is Sergei?" I asked, and they all replied in sync, "I am." "Yeah, sure, play a wise guy and drop the biggest deal lead you will ever get in your life," I replied. One of the brutiest tall Russian guys stood up and said in his deep-pitched voice, "I am Sergei. What do you want?" And I replied, "Just plain and simple trade. You do something for me, and I do something for you." I was playing a very confident Italian, and things were strenuous initially. Then Sergei walked out to the gambling room and took me to an exclusive office. "Talk, Mussolini. What do you trade in?" said the grumpy Russian. I looked at him for a bit, contemplating all different ways that he can kill me. And then I said, "I trade in you doing me one solid, and I give you lead that will make you the biggest merchant on this island." He looked at me with disapproval and said, "I don't want to be a merchant, too much work. I would continue being the crook I am." And then I said, "Don't you worry, it's the same thing." He looked at me and asked, "How much are we talking here?" And I said, "Enough for you to buy a machine to count it." He asked, "What is the solid one that you want?" And then I showed him a picture of Rosalina, and he looked at me and asked, "What about her?" And I said, "Tell your men to leave her alone now and forever." And I started writing an address of the port in the New York where all the shipment arrives. And I told him, "Be by the dock at 9. The shipment will crack in at 9 and Boys in the Blue would be at 9:30. You have the 30-minute window to swipe the place clean." And then as I was leaving, he said, "All right, you got yourself a deal. Your lead works. You never hear from us. But if it doesn't work, you will hear from us." As I started walking away, I wasn't sure what I was expecting. I sure just went through hell for my stepmom. I wasn't really sure if it would work, but as I did exit, I had a real sense of fear that crippled my whole spine. I messed with the wrong tiger. I am overconfident and I barked the wrong tree. I wasn't made for this. As I got out, I straight away went to meet my stepmom and I told her that I talked to Sergey. She was scared for me and I told her not to worry. And then few days in, I finally got the news. The Russian mob was apprehended. Well before going to confront Sergey, 3 guys got me into the truck and wired me. And yeah, I played the rat in the conversation and got evidence against Sergey. And then in return through my tip, Sergey was apprehended red-handed. Good riddance.